So we got to start with some basketball, though, because I know they're not going to play until tomorrow night, but I just can't stop thinking about the Knicks and about Julius Randle, because I don't think anybody could have foreseen how this series has gone for Julius Randle. And I honestly hope that Wednesday isn't the last of the postseason for him. I mean, the way he's played this year, he just deserves to have at least one last great performance in the Garden for this season, because he's meant so much to this team and the franchise. And to go out playing the way that he's been playing would just be so, I don't know, like deflating, just not indicative of the turnaround that he sparked with the Knicks. And I know Game 4 was a little bit better, but unfortunately what this series has shown is that for as great as Randle has been, he's always really been a number 2 guy and really not a number 1. And honestly, there's no shame in that. Like, number 2 guys make hundreds of millions of dollars in the NBA. You can't win titles without them. And Randle, I think, did an excellent impression of a number 1 guy in the regular season. He's getting MVP votes for how impressive he was. But ultimately, I think he is a number 2. Again, not an indictment, just the truth. And I wonder if the Knicks see it that way too. Do they see how Randle has been really muted in this series and think, we have to do everything we can to get a number 1? Or do they think if maybe they upgrade everything around Julius Randle that he has yet another gear? I mean, nobody could have expected how he came into this season and how he made himself a difference maker in the league. Does he have yet another gear to get to, and do the Knicks believe he can be a number 1? I see him as a number 2, and I think the Knicks have a massive opportunity in front of them this offseason, but they have a lot of work to do, and I think there's urgency in the front office to put more around this team, and this Hawks series has shown that.
Yeah, well, I think that a couple of things, I think you've learned from this series. I'll get to the Randle point here in a second. Number one is, Atlanta's whole, they're full. The ability to knock down the outside shot. They lost game 4 in this series by 17. Knicks got outscored by 18 from behind the arc. So when you look at guys like, Collins, Bogdanović, to a lesser extent, obviously, Danilo Gallinari. You look at Trae Young, the ability to knock down outside jumpers. The Knicks in Game 4 shot a tad under 32% from behind the arc. They hit 9 threes in the game. The Atlanta Hawks hit 15. The Hawks have got more options offensively. The other thing that hit me in this series is something we talked about before, where there's a level that Tom Thibodeau and Rick Bucher, I know, made these comments. He was on with Tiki and Tierney, made these comments, so echo the sentiment. And something we talked about before the series started, which was, the Knicks have got a level that they played at, and Tom Thibodeau squeezes every ounce out of his teams during the course of the regular season. When you look at the postseason, do the Knicks have the answers to be able to take their game to another level? And, well, you're seeing the talent disparity between the two teams. I mean, the Atlanta Hawks are a more physically gifted team, right? You looked at the Knicks. If their defense was not going to lead the way, we talked about how, really what defined this Knicks team outside of Julius Randle was their ability to defend and how they became a really good outside shooting team during the back half of the regular season. Well, we've seen issues with their outside shooting here in the first 4 games. They're down 3-1, and the defense at times has been exposed. Then you get to the individual performances. You mentioned about Julius Randle. I mean, for the better part of 3 games, Derrick Rose was the Knicks' best player. It was not Julius Randle, and Randle has really struggled offensively, defensively, trying to get his game going, missing bunnies down low, missing free throws, everything that we gave Randle credit for. And I understand. I really am hard-pressed not to define Julius Randle on these 4 games because I think it would be unfair to him. I think it really would be. I think when you look at a player that was kind of an afterthought coming into the year, became an Eastern Conference All-Star, was voted the most improved player in the NBA, now I'm going to look at these first 4 games for Julius Randle in these playoffs against the Atlanta Hawks as they come back tomorrow night for a Game 5 and say, well, you know what, Randle was great, but there's a limitation to Randle. I'm not so sure. I think everything you've seen would probably lead you to believe that maybe you're right, where he's more of a number 2 than a number 1. But I also think Julius Randle deserves a lot of credit because of the way that he has redefined himself as a player here in the NBA and has done it in quick, short order with the help of Thibodeau, Kenny Payne, who he recruited from Kentucky to be part of this coaching staff and redefined his body and his outside shot. He struggled. He's been terrible. And I get it. In this marketplace, what defines you as a player? What defines you as a player is the worst insult that could possibly be is you're a great regular season player, right? Because that would lead you to believe you've had opportunities to perform in the postseason and you've failed. So Randall's not been good in this series. I was hoping, I thought I was on the air on Friday, Maggie. I thought he was going to bounce back in a virtuoso Game 3 performance. He didn't. He gave you 23 in Game 4, but really it was kind of a soft 23 from Julius Randle. And the Knicks lost that game going away by 17. So do I expect Randle to bounce back tomorrow night? I would think that with the Garden faithful, packed house for the most part at MSG, Hawks down 3-1, whatever life you've got left from this Knicks team, you're going to see it tomorrow night.
Yeah, and I hope that he gets this. I hope he gets at least this. At least. I mean, maybe you're foreshadowing a bit more of a turnaround than maybe I see. I think it's a little bit hard here to see the path for the Knicks. And I know 13 times teams have come back down 3-1. And I doubt there was anyone who sat there going into a Game 5 was like, no, I think they really have a chance. They're down 3-1. Obviously, they've played terribly, and that's why they find themselves in this predicament. But I don't see the path of how they're going to win 3 in a row unless all of a sudden the Hawks just go absolutely ice cold. And I just don't see them doing that. Unfortunately, they've shown themselves to be the better all-around team, and their superstar has been better than our superstar. And the thing for Randle, again, this is not taking anything away from him. It's not just the market size moves that demands it. This is the NBA. The NBA is like a postseason league. It's just that kind of a league where people really have their reputations defined in the postseason. And that's where, Julius Randle unfortunately has come up short, but he's, playing against a team that also is really light on playoff experience. And they're obviously looking a lot more comfortable. The decision making, it's been said over and over again. I mean, Doris Burke, till she was blue in the face, talking about decision making for the Knicks has just not has been there. Tom Thibodeau has talked about the decision making for Randle has been uncharacteristic, because that has been such a good part of his game so far this season. Yeah. I mean, he's averaging 26% shooting from the field. He hasn't hit more than 2 3-pointers in any game in this series. He's got 17 assists, but to go with 15 turnovers and 5 in the last game, and he just cracked 20 points in this last Game 4. Maybe it's a sign of a turnaround. I'm running short on hope here, and I guess where I would say is this isn't, again, Randle took such a massive leap forward this season. I'm not going to heap it all on him, but he is the engine for this team, and he has been taken away. Where I'm really going to put now the next step, though, is actually on the front office. The next step for the Knicks is on Randle continuing to play how he's played. They need to upgrade this team, obviously, but this is now on them. They decided not to do anything at the deadline. They took this team, which has overachieved and brought us so much joy this year. I mean, really, seriously, joy to watch the Knicks. I mean, you're watching the scenes outside of Madison Square Garden on Friday, and it was amazing. But it's just like, I'm sorry, what was that, Wednesday? It's just not enough right now. The Knicks have to know that. And good for them that they have cap space. They've got draft picks. It's not like they're trying to do this and they have nothing in the tank and no arsenal and nothing to. They have the ability to really make sure that this isn't, what could have been.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's obvious. I mean, when you look at the teams, I mean, it's just, and yes, the Atlanta Hawks are going through it for the first time, but they've got the more modern game. I mean, they can knock down the outside shot, and Trae Young's exquisite. I mean, he's a great basketball player and can create and can do a lot of different things, can play off the ball, as we saw a little bit over the weekend down in Atlanta as well, on the ball, everything in his hands, the stop on a dime to be able to step up and hit the 30-footer. I mean, he's a very, very unique player, but plays in today's day and age in the NBA because, you know what, you don't have to be physical to be successful in the modern NBA game. And so that's where the game has completely changed. Yeah, I mean, I guess I come at it as a disappointed Knicks fan for the way that they've played. I think that you look at it overall, it's been a disappointment. Overall, the way that they've gotten, I think, out-coached by Nate McMillan at times, outplayed by the Atlanta Hawks, the way that Julius Randle has played, I've been disappointed that these games have not been more competitive, and we're not more competitive down in Atlanta. I never came into it thinking that this was a finished product, never looked into it as saying that they are a championship contending team, always knew that they were going to add. We talked about it during the course of the year. Who's going to be that next star that's going to be added to this group? So they were going to have to add for this team to go to, and this organization to go to another level. They played really bad basketball. So I'd like to see them where, unfortunately, a lot of the highlights of this series has been about, the chants at Madison Square Garden, the fan getting ejected. You had, you did have Randle have an 11-point quarter. You had Alec Burks have an 18-point quarter. I mean, there were some special qualities to this team early on, but it was really about a return in a celebratory mood, about a return for the Knicks to the playoffs. Well, let's look at where this Knicks team is right now, and they're down 3-1, and they look bad over the weekend. And I think a lot of people will look at it and say they've gotten exposed over the weekend down in Atlanta. And yes, I don't see the Knicks winning this series. Can I see them extending the series and getting themselves to Atlanta for a Game 6? I could see that. But I think the Atlanta Hawks have been the better basketball team by far in this series, and it's the way that the Knicks have played here where it's been disappointing because you've not gotten the great Randle performance, and this team has not really imposed their will on the Atlanta Hawks, something that we gave this organization, this squad, a lot of credit for the regular season. So I've been really kind of, miffed, bothered, angered by the way that this team has played. There's going to have to be adjustments during the course of the offseason. We'll see what kind of performance they give you tomorrow night at Madison Square Garden, but the way that they played down in Atlanta, it's really not indicative of what defined this team all season long, and that's what they've got to get back to doing. Thibodeau's talked about it, mentioned the decision-making by Julius Randle and others, but really what defines, the Knicks this year, which is great team defense, sharing the basketball, taking care of the basketball, as Thibodeau talks about controlling what you can control, and see if you can make the Atlanta Hawks sweat for a game.